So tonight we are going to talk about biblical metaphors that can carry us through COVID-19, specifically the metaphor of eagle, fortress, and rock. Now, I'm going to share a little bit about why this session, why this topic, and my hopes for this session, and as well as some logistics, and then we'll dig into the material. Before I actually start with anything else, I just want to invite everyone to take a deep breath. If you want, you could close your eyes. We are in just an unprecedented time. The very fact that we're here virtually, this Tikkun, instead of being with 3,000 of our best friends at SAJ at the JCC, is something, and the world around us is very intense and difficult right now. So just to kind of get us to be present in this moment, maybe kind of put aside the stress of getting online and figuring out how to do what we're doing. Just take a breath and take a moment to become a little more present. When COVID-19 kind of descended upon us in terms of the awareness of how we needed to respond, and the kind of stay-at-home order that came upon us in the middle of March, as every other synagogue in the country and organization, we quickly pivoted online. And instead of just doing what we normally do online, we realized immediately that there was a need to do more, because people were going to be needing and seeking religious communities and spiritual support through this difficult time. So right away, we put into place a very short 8 a.m. service every morning, Monday through Friday, that would become sort of a way for people to anchor their day. And I decided that in that process, every day, because it was going to be short, there would be a teeny bit of liturgy, and then we would delve into a psalm and see what the psalm might say. And I thought about psalms because psalms express, unlike so much other text, they express the feelings and the intensity of our desire, and our yearning for God, and our yearning to be moving forward, in a positive way through difficult times. So what I thought about the Psalms, that was what I assumed was going to resonate, was the yearning, the speaking, the voice of the psalmist. And of course that did, but what really, really ended up speaking to me were these metaphors. The metaphors that the psalmist would, not with every psalm, but many of the psalms utilize. The metaphors took me into places that enabled me to sort of leave my room without leaving my room, to be able to just see beyond this really difficult and challenging moment. So this is deeply personal Torah for me. And I want to invite that kind of space tonight to say that this is a text study, and I'm going to be sharing a lot of texts, but that I hope it's really in the vein of something that you can personally find meaning in, and that will give you some feeling of uplift. I'm hoping it's transformative Torah or hopeful Torah, or something you can find in it that is not just about learning with something intellectual, but something really with our whole body and mind and spirit. So with that, I'm going to kind of share the screen, and then there'll be times when I stop sharing the screen, and then I will invite you to share some comments or thoughts as much as is possible in this venue and with the time. So there'll be opportunities. If people know the raise hand function in Zoom, they can do that when that comes. Or if you want to just simply raise your hand and I'll see your name and I'll be able to write it down. I have a piece of paper here. So just to share that. So I'm going to kind of go back and forth with this screen. Okay, so hopefully everyone can see this. Before we jump into the metaphors, I want to talk a little bit about metaphor, just for a moment or two. And while, again, this psalm experience is what started and inspired this Torah journey for me, I have been informed by the work of a colleague, Rabbi Tova Spitzer, who talks a lot about God in metaphor and really tries to unleash us or give us freedom from the metaphors that might alienate us about the divine, things that maybe don't resonate and get us stuck in our relationship with God, and to move forward and to look at like the various amounts of other metaphors that exist in our tradition. So I'm just going to read a little bit from here. She says, "What I've come to understand in recent years is that the God problem that so many people have, and not everyone has, but many people have, is the difficulty of believing in or even taking seriously the notion of some kind of all-powerful, all-knowing being that interacts with us in mysterious ways is not really a problem with God. Rather, it is a reaction to a metaphor or a set of metaphors that have come to dominate our thinking about God. Think about Melech, King, Father. Those metaphors may be hard for some of us." And then she says, the second quote, "It takes a bit of work to dislodge the God is a big, powerful person metaphor from our consciousness and to make room for radically different ways of conceptualizing and experiencing the divine. Yet once we discover the variety of other metaphors available to us, the task becomes much easier." So that's my hope tonight. And then the second piece just to say is that Rabbi Larry Kushner talks about Torah as a mirror, that Torah is something where we can look inside ourselves and see ourselves within it. So for me, these metaphors are about, much of what is about God and the divine, but it's really, for me, about ourselves and how we manage what's going around us. And I think that it's equal parts, thinking about our relationship with God and really about our relationship with self, regardless of the God piece of it. So we'll get there when we get there, but just to say that that's sort of part of my conversation. So the first metaphor that we're going to explore is the metaphor of the eagle, God as an eagle. And okay, so this metaphor first appears very apropos for this evening. This metaphor first appears in Exodus 19, right as we are, as a people, preparing to receive the 10 Commandments. It will be read in shuls tomorrow morning, or in wherever you might be listening to the 10 Commandments if you're waking up to have a service in the morning. And God says this very beautiful quote, "You have seen what I did to the Egyptians, how I carried you, ve'asa etchem al kanfei nesharim, how I carried you on eagle's wings, ve'avi etchem alai, and I brought you to me." So God is, in the Torah, constructing God's self in a metaphor for the people to understand in this particular moment in time. Looking back, not that far back, but when the people were taken out. And this image of this, I put the image in the soaring eagle and the people being carried on that eagle. So when we think about eagles, I think of strong, agile, graceful, beautiful. And also, in particular, the Jewish way of understanding this particular metaphor in Exodus 19 is actually very maternal and very nurturing. Rashi makes a very famous quote about eagle's wings. Why are we talking about eagle's wings here? What is the Torah trying to say to us? What does it mean? So Rashi, the great medieval commentator, says, Knesher hanosei gozlav al knafav. on eagle's wings, and on an eagle which bears its fledglings, its babies, on its wings. Scripture uses this metaphor, Rashi goes on to say, because all other birds place their young between their feet, since they are afraid of another bird that flies above them. But the eagle fears none except for man, apprehending that perhaps he will shoot him with an arrow, since no bird can fly above the eagle. The eagle's so high up that he's not afraid of other birds. He's only afraid of human beings. Therefore, he places the young, these babies, on its wings, saying, better that the arrow should pierce me than my babies. What a really fascinating metaphor for the divine. First of all, I tried to look this up and see if eagles actually do this, and I couldn't find a lot of evidence to support it. But in this mythical imagination, there are this eagles carry their babies on their backs, and they do it because they are trying to protect those babies more from anything, from any kind of harm. And they have the capacity to do that because they're so high up. So we have God as a mama bird, as a bird, not just a bird, right? A mama, big creature that's just trying to protect its young. So what, like a radical image in my mind for God. Okay. So I'm going to show a few more places where we see this, but because I have so much stuff I want to show you, we're not going to look at all the text. Just to show you, I picked a few, and I'll just pick a few within them. So this, I found this commentary on the Chabad website, but he's talking about, why do we hear about eagle's wings right before Sinai? Like the timing of this could be said anywhere in the Torah, right? Why in this moment in particular? Why is it connected to the Ten Commandments and to this experience of Sinai? So he says, we must remember as we begin the more legalistic parts of the Torah that they must not be devoid of the eagle imagery. Civil law, which the Torah discusses immediately after describing the revelation at Sinai, stems from a divine ethic, a godly relationship, and a moral obligation based on the precedents of a loving relationship. For this reason, posit many commentaries like Rashi, God begins the Decalogue by describing God's self as the one who took us out from Egypt, reminding us of that bond with a loving eagle, a female eagle, I should say, who swoops us in the nick of time, who loves us without stipulation and would rather suffer than inflict pain upon us. So we have again this image of the love has to come first before the connection with the commandments. And this love is a very specific kind of love. It's a protecting, gathering, holding kind of maternal kind of love. Okay, so we see this metaphor in other places, including Hazinu, where in Deuteronomy, where there's about to be a lot of bad news about how the people are behaving. But of course, we like to couch the bad news with the love, right? Before we criticize the people, we have the relationship. And here we have again, in verse 11, like an eagle who rouses his nestlings, gliding down to his young, so did God spread God's wings and take him, the people, bear him along on God's pinions, outer feathers, and God alone did guide them. So again, reiterating that image of the birds and the nestle, the babies. And then in the Psalms, which again, as I mentioned at the beginning, was really the beginning of these metaphors for me, these images for me, we have over and over again this repetition of not eagle actually, but kinafav, wings. So we know it's a reference because it's the same word to the eagle, even though for some reason the Psalms never names it as a nesher, as an eagle. And sorry, 1 second. This blessing right here on Psalm 36, verse 8 is actually connected with our talit blessing in the morning. When we say that, there's a line that some people say before you say the bracha for putting on your talit. So there's a connection between putting on our talit and this idea of an eagle's wings that are covering us. So in the Psalms, they talk over and over again about God protecting us, being in the shade, the shadow of these amazing wings that can give us, particularly in the Psalms, shade, some kind of like rest, some shade, some comfort. Oh, that I might dwell in your tent forever, take refuge among your protecting wings, Selah. Okay, I'm going to stop the screen for 1 second. Just want to see if anyone has any reactions to this metaphor of the eagle. What does that do in your mind? If you think about God as an eagle with babies who are us on their shoulders, how does that change perhaps our understanding of God in this moment or in general? If anyone wants to share any reactions to that image, I'd love to hear it. It's okay if not, but if you could do the raise hand feature, or if anyone wants to just raise their hand. Okay. Okay, Miriam, I think you have to unmute yourself.
Yes, I did that. Okay. Well, it's an image of God as compassionate and holding us in his arms.
Yeah.
Yes, in arms that encircle us and comfort us in a compassionate, comforting, encircling, warm way.
Right. So for me, this image has been really powerful. When I think about this moment that I'm in and how difficult it is, right? How hard, like, you know, some days are better than others, but the pain that comes along with this really difficult moment, thinking about God as Melech versus thinking about God as a Nesher, feels really different to me, and feels really beautiful to think about this idea of finding shade in these wings, that they're large enough, they're expansive enough to really cover us and cover the heat, you know, really cover that, the hardest parts of this for us, that we can be held. And I think as someone who is a parent of medium-aged kids and like is a nurturer, to feel nurtured is also something that is resonant for me personally, to say like, okay, I'm giving a lot of, and a rabbi, you know, giving a lot of nurturance to others, you know, how can I kind of melt into this image and nurture also, feel nurtured myself? How can I invite the divine into that space to enable that to happen for me personally? So I want to share another piece about the eagle, one other teaching, which is to say that I mentioned at the beginning that Torah, Larry Kushner talks about Torah as a mirror. And so when we're talking about these metaphors of God, to me, they also really resonate personally. And Rav Kook, the great Rav Kook, the chief rabbi of Palestine, who lived from 1865 to 1935, he, you know, wrote these many, many gorgeous things. And among the things he wrote was this text. And there's actually a melody to it that is stunningly beautiful. If you ever hear it or can hear it or look it up, it's called Ben Adam. And he says, if you desire to, human being, he's talking to Ben Adam, a human being. He says, if you desire to, human being, then look at the light of God's presence. Gaze at the wonders of creation, at their divine life. Know the reality in which you live, know yourself and your world. And then this is the part where the contemporary song comes in. He says, so it goes, Ben Adam, alei lamala alei, kikoach az lecha, yesh lecha kanfei ruach, kanfei nisharim abirim. Rise up, for you have the strength to do so. Ben Adam, human being. You have the wings of the spirit, wings of powerful eagles. Do not deny them, or they will deny you. Seek them, and you will find them in a flash. I've been singing this song for a year or so since I learned this amazing melody. But only when examining this metaphor did I realize how radical Rav Kook's statement is. Because in the Torah, it never says that we are eagles. It only says that God is an eagle. But if we think about it, as God is compassionate, so we should be compassionate, as we learn in our Talmud. As God is caring, so we should be caring. As God is like an eagle, so we should be like an eagle. This flips it on to us and says, you, my friend, my neighbor, you are powerful like an eagle. You have the capacity to go so high in the sky that no one can attack you, right? That no one can get you, that no one can bring you down. You have grace, you have capacity. And so here, this metaphor flips on itself and is talking to each of us. So now we get to be the eagle. Now in COVID-19, I don't often feel like the eagle, but I can strive to feel like the eagle. I can strive to say, I am strong enough for this. You know, I can do this and I can find my way. I have these wings, and because of that, I know I can soar. So it's an invitation for us to really think about our own power and our own capacity to rise above the situations in which we find ourselves. So whether it's thinking about God as a nurturer, eagle, you know, carrying us through this moment, or maybe for some of us, it's more comfortable or more empowering to turn that metaphor on us and to say, okay, I can emulate that. I can strive to be, you know, like that eagle. And what does that also really means? Like feeling free when right now we don't, I'm guessing like most of us don't feel so free, right? We can't really leave the house that much. So how do we transcend that, right? How do we find, again, not all the time, but moments where we might say, you know, we're free no matter where we are. We're free no matter what's going on around us. We can be like the eagle. Okay, so I'm gonna stop sharing for 1 minute. Does anyone have any thoughts or questions about that? And then I'll move us on to the next image, next metaphor. People like the eagle. It's so strange teaching on Zoom. Thumbs up, hopefully, for the eagle. Okay. Yes, great. Okay, so the next metaphor that I want us to think about is a metaphor of a fortress. Now, okay, 1 second, I'll share the screen again. Okay. So in this category, I'd say in this category, there's actually a number of images and a number of Hebrew words that often can be used interchangeably or with subtle varieties. So we have, I didn't really, just for time's sake, include another one of my favorite, but I feel like it's in this category, just to name it, is is magain, which is, it says, well, a shield, that in the Psalms and in other places, it will say, God is a shield to you. And I just love that image of a shield, of like, you're still out in battle, but you got a little protection. And then along these sort of army and military images is a fortress, and also a tower, a haven. So there's Mitsudah, Migdal is a tower, Miskav is sort of like another encovering. And so this is sort of the realm of thinking about the divine as a fortress, Okay. So Just put in a little definition. I put on Masada. A fortress is a fortified place, a large, potentially permanent, not always, fortification, sometimes including a town, a castle, a stronghold, a place of defense or security. So in the Torah or in Tanakh, we see this image of fortress many places, although predominantly in Psalms. I saw it, I believe it was for the first time in the second book of Samuel, where God says, God is really speaking to God's self. Oh God, my crag, my rock, sort of like smaller rock, my fortress, my deliverer. And then we see that again in many places in Psalms. So, and they're often together with multiple images. I say of the Lord, I say of Adonai, my refuge and my stronghold, my God in whom I trust, that God will save us from the fowler's trap, from the destructive plague. I'm going to read the second one together and then talk about them together. A Psalm of David. Blessed is Adonai, my rock. Come back to rock as our third one. Who trains my hands for battle, my fingers for warfare, my faithful one, my fortress, my haven and my deliverer, my shield. This one just like throws them all in, all the images, all these types of images together, in whom I take shelter, who makes people subject to me. So we have Mitzudah, Miskav, shield, Magain. And what I feel, what has impacted me, or what has sort of given me pause for this image for fortress, and this idea of these sort of more military images, is that we can envision, like the psalmist is often in a struggle or in a battle against wicked people, against, their own disease. Honestly, there's often struggle and conflict, and ultimately most often a resolution towards that. But there's a lot going on, which is why, again, I chose to delve into Psalms, because it's so resonant for us today. And when you think about a fortress, for me, it's something that is like also protective in the same way that an eagle is, but at the same time, I'm really still in the battlefront. It's like I'm there, but I can go into this place. I can go into this sort of like more protective space, that there's going to be something that will kind of hold me, but I'm still acknowledging my vulnerability. Like I'm not like on an oasis island, right? I'm not elsewhere. I'm in the battle. Like here we have you training my hands for battle, my fingers for warfare. But like, because I have this deliverance, I know that I can sustain myself through that. So it feels like this kind of, it's very militaristic, but on the other hand, it's very much inside of a space of vulnerability that we can find a sense of fortress. Same idea. I really also resonated with this idea of a migdal, which is like more of a tower. And it says twice in Proverbs and then in Psalms that God, or God's name, is a tower of strength. A tower of strength. So somehow, like in the midst of the chaos and in the midst of what's so painful and difficult, there's a feeling or an experience of the divine being what is strong and what kind of can ground me and hold me in a difficult moment. So I'm going to pause here and see if anyone has any reactions to this metaphor, which is fortress. What does that like feel like to you? Does that, what I'm saying, resonate, or some other, idea pop into your mind when you think of God as fortress? Carol, yeah. I think you have to unmute, Carol.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, the first thing that comes to my mind is self-protective.
Yeah.
Community builds a fortress in order to protect from the enemy from the outside. So there's self-protection first, in a way, as well as the strength, the fortitude. That's all I got
That's
right.
beautiful. Actually, I have more to say on that, but does anyone else have any other comments? Gail, are you waving? Or are you just, okay, fixing your microphone. Okay. Oh yeah, Robin.
When I think of a fortress, I think of a structure, and it kind of makes me think of feeling safe in our homes like we are right now, whereas the eagle was more of strength, but with freedom. So a lot of strength in both situations, but a different kind of strength to me.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you. I think that someone else put that in the chat, I think, as well. Like, how can we in this moment build our homes to become a fortress, right? Like, how do we facilitate? That's a great question. How do we facilitate like this process of self-protection, like Carol talked about? I've actually, I've spoken about this fortress as in terms of a divine metaphor, but also you can think about it in other ways too. Like, what is the fortress that is protecting you right now? Is it community? Is it a particular relationship that is keeping you going? It doesn't have to necessarily only be this divine, right, image, but this idea of a fortress being, like, where am I spiritual practice, right? What is fortifying me so that I can kind of go into that fortress and then emerge again? What can I do to support that practice? I see someone with a hand, Mark. I can't see your face, but I see a blue hand. So I think I'm hoping that you'll chime in. Great.
Yeah, thanks. I actually don't think of a fortress as being a defensive thing. I think of it as being more offensive. A fortress is an outpost from which soldiers ride out on.
Yeah.
So it's kind of fun to think of maybe of God being about staking out territory, almost like staking out mind space.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I wanted to also add, one of the things that I often say to SAJ members, especially on this 8 a.m. call, and some of you are here, is like, you don't have to read everything. You don't have to read all the news. You don't have to engage in everything going on around you, right? You need to protect yourself in order to make it through this process. And so thinking about this idea of constructing a fortress for yourself, like, that is, we need times where we can be either offensively or defensively protecting ourselves, because we are in this for the long haul, right? And self-protection, self-preservation is a really strong value right now. Is really, really important, and each of us needs to know. That's just to say to shut up the world completely, but for moments, for times where we need to do that, to refresh ourselves and to be able to sustain ourselves in the long run. So for me, that's another piece of why this fortress imagery resonates so powerfully. I'm going to move us along to the third. Is Zoom a fortress? Great question for another session. Is Zoom yes and no, I would say, right? So the last image that I want to focus on is the image of a rock. This is an image that's probably the most familiar to all of us of these three in terms of divine images. Sorry Yisrael. For those of us who go to services regularly, we sing it regularly. Sorry Yisrael, and the Rock of Israel. And it's a more common metaphor, although not talked about as much, right? Because we do a lot of Melech and Avinu in our tradition. But I think the metaphor of the rock is interesting I'm going to take it in a slightly different direction than perhaps the others. Coming back to our screen. Okay. Okay. All right. So I picked this image on purpose because I feel like this is what the psalmist is getting at. So we'll see when we hear it. Okay. So as we mentioned, this idea of God as a rock is a theme that is pretty rooted, although I didn't find it in the Torah. I only found it in the next books in Nevi'im, but it's still, it's rooted in the prophets, and then continues through Psalms and continues to make its way into our liturgy. God of Israel has spoken, the rock of Israel has said concerning me, which is interesting because there's two, it's clear that the rock image is bringing something new to the conversation, because we have in this text a repetition. God, the God of Israel and the rock of Israel. Why do we need both? Why does it need to say both? Why doesn't it just say God of Israel or rock of Israel, right? You don't need both. So it's clear that what they're evoking is different. They're meant to evoke different things. Sorry, Israel. Also, Sorry, Israel is become a big, in Israel, there's a lot of our prayers for Israel. Sorry, Israel, so it's something we know is strength, fortitude. Okay, then in Isaiah, God, we say, for you, there shall be singing as on a night when a festival is hallowed. There shall be rejoicing as when they march with flute, the timbrels, and the lyres to the rock of Israel on the mount of the Lord. And the most famous that we probably know, Yehi l'ratzonim refi v'hagyon libi lefanecha tzuri v'goali. May the words of my mouth and the prayers of my heart be acceptable to you, O God, my rock and my redeemer, which is in Psalms, but also in the ending of our Amidah. Okay, so we have established this idea of God as rock. We can imagine many things that could indicate: strength, solidness, permanency, just like the rocks we put on graves, right, are the symbol of what's permanent versus the soul that's permanent versus what's lost. So all of those things I think are very beautiful. But when it came to the Psalm study that we've been doing, the things that really took my breath away, and I really mean that really sat with me, was the idea of us humans being put on a rock. That physical, so I'll show you. Okay. So in Psalm 27, which is the psalm that we say for the month of Elul, right after the famous quote that's often sang, it says, God will shelter me, verse 5, God will shelter me in God's pavilion, in God's house, on an evil day, grant me protection of God's tent, and raise me high on a rock. Now is my head high over my enemies round about. I sacrifice in God's tents with joy, singing and a chant a hymn to the God. So what is going to happen for me is that I'm going to be lifted up on some kind of physical rock. I just find that, okay, but the next one I love the best. Okay. This to me is like everything. Psalm 40, I put my hope in God. God inclined toward me and heeded my cry. God lifted me out of this sticky, mire-filled pit, slimy clay, and set my feet on a rock and steadied my legs. So we have this image of us, you can see we're totally stuck in the mud. Our feet are full of clay. We can't even move them. They're completely, there's nowhere to go. And we are placed lovingly and triumphantly onto a rock, onto a higher ground, onto a higher place. To me, just that image, I could dwell in that image for a really, really long time. What does that mean to be on a rock, and to be taken from that pit? Okay, we see again, hear my cry, heed my prayer. From the end of the earth I call you. When my heart is faint, you lead me to the rock that is high above. For each of these three metaphors, there were many more sources. I just tried to bring a sampling. But this, again, like elevation, coming from a low place, being studied on a rock. But what's a rock? We go to, for those of us in New York, we go to Central Park, we go on those beautiful rocks, we feel good, but we know that they're not super steady. Like, we could fall, we could, they don't go forever. It's not like being put on level ground. We're still vulnerable, but yet we're in a better place and we're in a higher place. And then also, if you think about that, like the elevation, for me, it's about going from like this low to high, is like being able to watch what's going on around us versus being stuck in the mud, stuck in the mire and oh, I'm so angry, I'm so frustrated. Okay, wait, I can like take a seat on top of everything and look down, like mindfulness, like I can watch what's going on. So the elevation and the fact that it's both sturdy and unsteady, to me, just speaks so much of like this moment of what we need. It's not like an unrealistic, we're placed on, somewhere where we're never going to get hurt again, but we're steadied. We're steadied. And like, that's what we need right now. So I wanted to share from Maya Angelou, the Torah of Maya Angelou, and then kind of bring it all together. Maya Angelou does this incredible poem, she did for Clinton's, she read at President Clinton's inauguration, and it's much longer, and it's all metaphor, right? And she talks about rock, river, tree, and this is the one section where she's talking about a rock, and I thought it just like speaks so beautifully to the text that I just read, and speaks and adds. So she says, today the rock cries out to us, clearly, forcefully, come, you may stand on my back and face your distant destiny, but seek no haven in my shadow. So the eagle, it's like the opposite of the eagle. We're not looking for shadow. We're not looking for shade. We want to come out on the rock. I will give you no hiding place here. You, created only a little lower than the angels, have crouched too long in the bruising darkness, have lain too long facing down in ignorance, your mouths spilling words armed for slaughter. The rock cries out to us today. You may stand upon me, says the rock, but do not hide your face. The rock cries out to us, you may stand upon me, but do not hide your face. The rock, like when God is placing us on this rock, or we're placing ourselves on this rock, we're vulnerable, we're exposed. We're not seeking shade, we're seeking courage. We're seeking the ability to face the moment. And that's like an invitation, what it could mean to go from this slimy pit to being lifted on a rock, to being able to face what's going on. Okay, I'm gonna stop sharing. We have like time for one or two comments, and then I'm gonna kind of wrap it up. Does anyone have any reactions to the rock metaphor, to either God as rock or us being lifted upon a rock, and how might that change the way we see our situation in COVID or in life? Like, what does it invite for us? I'm happy to keep talking, but if anyone wants to say anything, okay. To me, oh, Lester, great, thank you. You have to unmute.
Okay.
Oh, do it again. Yep.
There we go. Okay. So, I think we often talk about a friend or somebody as he's my rock, you
Right.
know, the person I go to when I'm falling apart, because I know they're going to give me that strength. I have somebody like that.
Yeah.
And there is a steadiness, but there's also a surrender to it.
Yeah.
You know, it's like when I'm with that rock, you can be hugged by that rock. But the metaphor of don't hide your face, the Torah talks about God's face. So we're going to be open. The rock is saying, don't hide your face. You know, I'm going to put you there, but God, don't hide your face at the same
Right.
time that
Right.
you're leaving me on this high, vulnerable, but solid place. It's,
Right.
you know.
Yeah. That's great. It's great. Okay. Carol, yeah. Yeah, that's a mute. Carol. Okay.
The don't hide your face, because I'm hearing that from the song, but the don't hide your face is usually God saying, is usually a person saying to God, don't hide your face from me, I'm seeking you. And in this poem, it seems the opposite. It seems it's the rock is saying to the person, don't hide your face from me. So it's more like, be more open.
Right. Right.
That, you know, it's a reversal.
Yeah.
What I usually think of it as. So
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah.
I love that that invitation to be courageous that Maya Angelou offers us with that, you know, and to kind of move away from what we're hiding from. I think that's just so stunning. I want to just, you know, it's a short time period we have together, but I really want to invite you to think about which one of these metaphors, if any, hopefully one or two, but let's stick with one, like speaks to you, you know, and think about it as a tool you could use in your practice, whatever that looks like over the next few months or however long we're in this thing, right? Weeks, months, whatever. And, you know, like I have found myself going back to, I think especially this rock image and, you know, the Magen, the shield also, and like, you know, just like meditating on that and thinking about what that can bring, like how that can lift me up in this moment, right? When I can feel so like in the pit, right? How can I be lifted up on that rock? Like the same idea of the psalmist. So just in conclusion, I want to say like these are three really different kinds of metaphors and they speak to different spiritual needs. And right now, in the moment that we're experiencing, obviously in life, period, but especially heightened right now, we have times where we might need to feel the eagle, and we have times where we might need to feel the rock. And then we have times where like, no, we need to go to that fortress, right? And like, they're all available to us. And it's kind of gives us permission to feel and experience all the things we're feeling, to know that they're all good and okay and normal and human and resonant with our ancestors, and to find pathways to open up to the moment, right? Just to feel it and to open up and to validate our experience. So I want to say, like, sometimes we might be afraid and we might feel helpless. We might feel like we're just sick of being stuck inside. We're sick of giving energy out into everyone else. And then we might want to call on God as the eagle and say like, okay, just swoop me up, right? Swoop me up. Or if we're feeling like we're powerless, okay, no, Ben Adam, like Rav Kook, you know, you got those wings, you got to fly. Sometimes we're struggling and we're wrestling and we're overwhelmed and we need to go into a fortress, right? Or we feel like we need to get on top of things, like that wonderful person said, you know, be offensive about the situation we're in. And then maybe the fortress image will resonate for you. And sometimes, and maybe most of the time, or definitely sometimes, we're in that slimy clay-filled pit where we can barely move our legs. And then it's calling upon God with a capital G, or God that is in our inside of ourselves, to try to move out of that and onto the rock, and to find spaces for vulnerability, but also for courage. So I want to wish everyone a wonderful, Shavuot, and a lot of strength and hope and community and everything you need to navigate the next period of the world in which we're living. Thank you for joining me tonight.